Hello students, in this session of the chapter that is reproduction in lower and higher plants, we are going to discuss regarding the remaining questions which are provided in the HSC board question bank. Then we will see regarding the 2 marks question. Now the first question is, draw a well-labeled diagram of TS of anther, that is transfer section of a anther. So you will have to draw a neat label diagram of TS of anther as well as label it correctly. And there are total 2 marks, and these 2 marks are distributed for 4 labels. That means half mark is given to each correct label. So you will have to write the names or label the diagram with 4 correct labels so that you will get 2 marks. Now you know the transfer section of anther. It shows presence of 4 pollen sacs. Hence it is called as tetrasporangiate anther. Now TS of anther shows outermost layer called as epidermis. Then the second layer or the next layer is called as endothecium. Then next to the endothecium, 1 to 2 layers called as middle layers are present. Then inner to the middle layers is tapetum. Tapetum is a nutritive layer. Then inner to the tapetum, sporogenous tissue is present, which produces diploid microspore mother cells, which later on undergo meiosis, and each diploid microspore mother cell will produce 4 haploid pollen grains or microspores. So, at the center, connective is present, which show presence of vascular tissues. So, you will have to draw a neat label diagram, and any 4 labels should be correct so that you will get 2 marks. Then the second question is, describe the structure of pollen grain. Now pollen grain is also called as microspore. So in this question, while writing the answer, you will have to write 4 points, and also you will have to draw a neat label diagram, and the mark distribution will be that each correctly written point will carry half mark each. So total you will have to write 4 correct points so that you will get 2 marks. Here we can see 4 points. Now the answer shows the first point is regarding the process of microsporogenesis. The process of formation of microspores or pollen grains from diploid microspore mother cell through meiotic cell division inside the microsporangia. Now microsporangia is also called as pollen sacs, and you know that there are total 4 pollen sacs in dithecous anther, while 2 pollen sacs in monothecous anther. So the formation of this pollen grain is called as microsporogenesis. Now remaining 3 points will describe the structure of pollen grain. Now here in this diagram we can see the structure of pollen grain. Now outer layer is exine, then inner layer is intine. Then this exine will show small openings. These are called as germ pores. Through this germ pore, the pollen tube will come out during the pollen germination. Then at the center, nucleus is present, which is surrounded by cytoplasm. So the second point shows the structure of pollen grain or microspore. Now pollen grain or microspore is non-motile. That means it cannot move on its own. Then it is haploid, unicellular body or structure with single nucleus. Then it is surrounded by a two-layer structure or wall. It is called as sporoderm. And this sporoderm consists of two layers, that is outer exine and inner intine. Now the exine is thick and it is made up of complex non-biodegradable substance called as sporopollenin, and it is resistant to chemicals. That means this sporopollenin protect the pollen grain from chemical as well as biological decomposition. Now exine may be smooth. Now smooth exine is found in monocot pollen grain, while it may be spiny or with sculptured pattern, which is found in dicotyledonous plant. Now at some places the exine is very thin, and these thin areas are called as germ pores. Now germ pore is made for the growth of emerging pollen tube, or the growing pollen tube comes out through the germ pore during the germination of pollen grain. Then inner layer is called as intine. It is thin and delicate, and it is made up of substance called as cellulose and pectin. Then the next question is, draw a well-labeled diagram of male gametophyte of angiosperms. Now you know that at two-celled stage, the pollen grains come out of the anther, and by the process of pollination, they are deposited on the surface of stigma. So this two-celled stage pollen grain absorbs sugary substance secreted by the stigma, and the pollen grains undergo the process of germination. So the pollen grain will undergo germination. That means the tube cell along with tube nucleus and cytoplasm will come out through the germ pore, and it will produce a pollen tube. Then inside this pollen tube, the generative cell will undergo mitosis to produce two non-motile haploid male gametes. And pollen tube will show presence of tube nucleus, then two male gametes, cytoplasm. So this structure of the pollen grain is called as male gametophyte of angiosperms. So you will have to draw a diagram of pollen grain with pollen tube showing cytoplasm, then two male gametes, tube nucleus. So for this diagram, one mark is given and remaining one mark is distributed, that is half mark for each correct label. That means minimum you will have to give two labels, that is half mark will be given to each correct label. Now the next question is, describe the structure of female gametophyte of angiosperms. Now you know that female gametophyte is produced inside the nucellus, and while writing the answer, total 4 points should be written, and each point carries half mark each. Similarly, you should also draw a labeled diagram. As in the notes it is given that draw neat and labeled diagrams wherever they are necessary. Now the 4 points regarding the structure of female gametophyte of angiosperms are: first one is, in angiosperms, female gametophyte present in the ovule is haploid embryo sac. Each embryo sac contains egg apparatus, 3 antipodal cells and 2 polar nuclei. Then the female gametophyte is present inside the ovule and is haploid embryo sac. Then second point is, the egg apparatus consists of large central haploid egg cell and two supporting haploid synergid cells. Now synergids show hair-like projections called as filiform apparatus, which guide the pollen tube towards the egg or female gamete. Then the third point is, antipodal cells are a group of 3 cells present at the chalazal end. Then fourth point is, the two haploid polar nuclei of large central cell fuse to form diploid secondary nucleus, or it is called as definitive nucleus, just prior to or just before the fertilization. Now here we have seen the 4 points which should be written in the answer. Now this is the structure of female gametophyte, and it is haploid as it is produced from haploid megaspore. Then it contains egg apparatus, the group of 3 cells at the micropylar end is called as an egg apparatus. Then at the center, two polar nuclei are present, and towards the chalazal end, 3 antipodal cells are present. This is the first point. Then in second point, you will have to write. Now here we can see at the center, the large cell is haploid egg cell, or it is called as female gamete, and it shows two lateral synergids, and these lateral synergids contain hair-like projections called as filiform apparatus. Now the role of filiform apparatus is to guide the pollen tube towards the egg for the process of fertilization. Now at the chalazal end, group of 3 cells called as antipodals are present, and at the center, these two haploid polar nuclei form a cell, or they come together to form a cell. It is called as diploid cell, and it is called as secondary nucleus, or it is also called as definitive nucleus. So these 4 points must be included in the answer. Now the next question is, mention various type of adaptations for wind pollination. Now in the answer, you will have to write any 4 points or any 4 adaptations, and each adaptation will carry half mark each. So, in all, 4 adaptations should be written. Now, the diagram is not necessary in this answer. So, this diagram I have given here just for your understanding. So, there is no need to draw this diagram in this answer. Now, the adaptations in anemophilous flowers are, now you know that anemophilous flowers are those which carry the pollination with the help of wind. Now, the first adaptation is, as the flowers are wind pollinated, the flowers are small in size, then they are inconspicuous. Inconspicuous means they are not easily noticeable. Then they are colorless, without nectar and fragrance, or it is called as odor. Then the pollen grains produced are light in weight. Then they are dry and are produced in large numbers so as to increase the chances of pollination, considering the wastage of pollen grains. That means as pollen grains are light, they are dry and they are produced in large numbers, as these pollen grains are carried with the help of wind, as there may be wastage of pollen grains. Then the stigma is feathery to trap pollens carried by wind currents. So here in this diagram, we can see the structure of stigma. The structure of stigma, here is the ori and these are the feathery stigma. Now this feathery stigma help to trap the pollen grain in it. Then the next point is regarding stamens. Stamens are exerted or they show long filaments and versatile anther. Now here we can see this anther is versatile. Versatile means it is movable anther. Such type of movable anther or this anther is loosely attached to the connective. Hence, such type of anther is called as versatile anther. The fifth point is stamens and stigmas are exposed to air currents. That means pollen grains can be easily carried with the help of wind, as well as they can be easily deposited on the surface of the stigma. Then the next question is, what are the different adaptations shown by bird pollinated flowers? Now, the pollination carried with the help of bird is called as ornithophily, and the plants or the flowers which show bird pollination are called as ornithophilous flowers. Now, while writing the answer, you will have to write any 4 adaptations. Each adaptation will be for half mark each. Now the adaptations in ornithophilous flowers are, the first one is flowers are usually brightly colored, large and showy. That means they are bright in color and they are attractive as well as they are large in size. Then they secrete profuse dilute nectar. That means they produce large amount of nectar and which is dilute. And you know that this nectar is used as food material by the birds. Then the pollen grains are sticky and they are spiny, so that the pollen grains get attached to the parts of the birds. Then flowers are without fragrance as birds have poor sense of smell. That means as the birds have poor sense of smells, the flowers show absence of fragrance. So these are the adaptations found in ornithophilous flowers. Then the next question is explain heterostyle and hercogamy with suitable example. That means heterostyle will carry 1 mark and hercogamy will carry 1 mark. Now in heterostyle, the meaning will carry half mark and half mark is for the example. In hercogamy, half mark is for meaning and half mark for example. So in this way, the distribution of mark is carried. Now the first one is heterostyle, or it is also called as heteromorphy. Heteromorphy means the plants or some plants. For example, primrose, or it is called as primula, produce 2 or 3 types of flowers in which the stigmas and the anthers are placed at different levels. So this prevents the pollen grains from reaching the stigma and pollinating it. That means cell pollination does not occur. In heteromorphic flowers, heteromorphic means morphologically dissimilar flowers. Pollen grains produced from anther pollinate stigmas produced at the same level. Thus, cell pollination is not possible in such cases. So, to carry cross pollination, heterostyle is found in the flowers. Then the next one is hercogamy. It is also meant for cross pollination. Now, hercogamy is a mechanical device or it is a mechanical barrier to prevent cell pollination in bisexual flower. In plants, for example, calotropis. So in plants, a natural physical barrier is present between two sex organs to avoid contact of pollen with stigma of the same flower. So in some bisexual flower, an obstacle is created between male and female reproductive organs so that cell pollination does not occur. Now example calotropis. In calotropis, pentangular stigma is placed or it is positioned above the level of the anthers. These anthers are called as pollinia in calotropis. So as the stigma is at greater height than the anthers, the cell pollination is avoided and in such flowers cross pollination is observed. Then the next question is give the significance of double fertilization. Now you know that double fertilization is a process which occurs only in angiosperm. In this diagram we can see the process of double fertilization. Now the first male gamete fuses with haploid female gamete or egg cell to produce diploid zygote. This is syngamy or first fertilization. Then the second male gamete, which is haploid, fuses with diploid secondary nucleus to produce a triploid primary endosperm nucleus and it is called as triple fusion. So in double fertilization, both the male gametes fuse at two different places. Now the answer when written, it should contain at least 4 significant points and each point will carry half mark. So you will have to write any 4 points of significance. Now the first point is it is the unique feature of angiosperms. The second one is it ensures that the parent plant invests a seed with food store only if the egg is fertilized. Then next point is the diploid zygote develops into an embryo which later on develops into a new plant. Then the product of second fertilization, that is triploid primary endosperm nucleus, develops into a nutritive endosperm tissue. You know that endosperm provides nourishment to the developing embryo. Then double fertilization restores the diploid condition by fusion of haploid male gamete with a haploid female gamete. That is first fertilization or through syngamy. Then it also helps to avoid polyembryony. Now polyembryony means formation of more than one embryo. So you will have to write any 4 point from the given answer. And here diagram is not necessary. Now the next question is mention the significance of fruit and seed formation. Now you know that after fertilization, ovule develops into seed and ovary develops into fruit. Now while writing the answer, you will have to write any 4 points regarding the significance of seed and fruit. Now the first point is that fruits provide nourishment to the developing seeds. That means the food material or the nutrients produced in the fruit provide nourishment to the developing seeds. Then second point is fruits protect the seeds in immature condition. That means the fruits protect the seeds in immature conditions. That means when the seeds are young and are on the way of maturation. Then seeds serve as important propagating organs, or these are also called as units of plants. Now you know that reproduction occurs in each living organisms. So to produce new plant or to propagate new plants, seeds are useful and they serve as important propagating units for the development of new plants. Then seeds and fruits develop special devices for their dispersal and thus help in the distribution of species. Now you know that dispersal means the seeds are transferred to different places or the fruits are also transferred to different places for the distribution of species. Now for example, different seeds show hair-like structures due to which they are transferred to different places and these species can be developed in different places. So such mechanisms are developed in fruits as well as seeds for the distribution of species. Now the last 2 mark question is give an account of polyembryony. Now polyembryony means formation of more than one embryo in the seed is called as polyembryony. Now while writing the answer, you will have to write any 4 correct points regarding polyembryony. Now the first point is polyembryony is the occurrence or development of more than one embryo in a seed which consequently results in the emergence or formation of multiple seedlings. So polyembryony results in the formation of multiple seedlings. Now seedlings means these are the small newly developed plants after seed germination, and these develop from the embryos of the seed. Then the next point is the additional embryos result from the differentiation and development of various maternal and zygotic tissues associated with the ovule of the seeds. That means the embryos develop from the different maternal and zygotic tissues which are associated with the ovule of the seed. Then inadventive polyembryony. An embryo develops directly from the diploid cell of nucellus and integuments as in citrons. Then the next point is in cleavage polyembryony. Zygote proembryo sometimes divides. It is called as the process of cleaving, or the proembryo divides, or it is called as cleaves, and it forms many parts or units, and each unit then develops into an embryo. That means you know that the zygote proembryo sometimes divides and forms different units or parts, and each unit or part later on develops into an embryo. This type of polyembryony is called as cleavage polyembryony. So here you will have to write any 4 points regarding polyembryony. So here we have seen regarding the 2 marks questions and their answers from the chapter number 1, that is reproduction in lower and higher plants, from the question bank provided by the HSC board. Remaining questions we will see in our next session.